Howdy and welcome to Brian's Hobbies. I want to do a video today about the DIY homebrew paint thinners you find on YouTube, and specifically those for acrylic water-based paints and some things you're going to want to consider before you use them. Also, I did a video a while back about the techniques I use to get really nice high quality finishes when using an airbrush with craft paints. And in that video, I included a bit about my DIY paint thinner and why I use it over the other options. But as things often do, I've tweaked that recipe a bit, and I want to do an update on that and get into some more detail about the characteristics of these different thinner options and how well they actually work. First, let's talk about the options I'm sure you've seen on YouTube. The two most popular of these are windshield washer fluid and isopropyl alcohol. Now, they both work, but the IPA can react with the binders and pigments in acrylic paint. The paint curdled up like cottage cheese. It was blocking up my airbrush, made it nearly impossible to clean. At first, I thought the paint was the problem, but after about the third try, I figured out it was the isopropyl alcohol that was the culprit. So this got me to thinking, what else could a practicing tightwad like myself use for airbrush thinner? And this sent me down that rabbit hole of MSDS sheets and formulas and of the different water-based thinners. And let me tell you, it was eye-opening. What I found was I am not going to pronounce that right, 2-butoxyethanol. 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 What I found was a substance called 2-butoxyethanol, was one of the more common wetting agents across multiple brands, including Vallejo, although I've heard they have removed it now, but I can't find a current data sheet online for that. So this stuff is also a known carcinogen, and I'm going to link to some additional resources on that in the description because it's used in a lot of stuff. Toxicity aside, these branded thinners are also quite expensive. A bottle of the Vallejo I got on Amazon was more than $14, although I'm sure you could find it at a local shop cheaper, but it would still just be a matter of a few dollars. Did I mention I'm a practicing tightwad? Now, I did purchase the thinner and the flow improver specifically for this video, and I can still use those, but it'll only be when the paint booth is vented outside and I'll be wearing my respirator and nitrile gloves, which you probably should do anyway. So enough about that. Let's get into testing. I knocked around for 2 or 3 days trying to come up with different ways to visually demonstrate the differences between the thinner formulas. And you would think the most obvious one would be just to run it through your airbrush on different samples. And I tried that, but honestly, there wasn't much difference and it was not going to show on video. I finally landed on what I'm calling a puddle test. And surprisingly enough, it clearly shows the surface tension of each thinner. I mean, after all, decreasing the surface tension is the goal when it comes to thinning acrylics for added flow and control issues. We've all seen a drop of water and that rounded lens shape it has when setting on different surfaces. This is surface tension that keeps that shape. Water molecules are attracted to each other. So when you add a wetting agent, its molecules gets in between the water molecules and causes a loss of cohesion, or in other words, it just means it wants to spread out. So the test I devised, I'm going to use gravity to visually demonstrate the thinning power of each formula. This is how it works. I filled up a bunch of little dropper bottles, and each with the different thinner, and I'll be very carefully creating little tiny puddles of each formula and then comparing those to the store-bought option, Vallejo in this case. Now, I'm not looking to outperform Vallejo. What I am looking for is something that's comparable. So we're looking for a DIY recipe that will have the same thinning and flow capabilities, but is much cheaper and hopefully less toxic. So I'm not 100% certain what happened there, but when I downloaded the video from the test segment, the audio was completely gone. So we're going to do a voiceover, which may work better. So we're going to use water kind of as a control. It's not super scientific, but we still want to, control some parameters. The Process will be we're going to make a couple of little puddles of each fluid, and then we'll do some close-up, and you can see the visual difference between the characteristics of each one. To start with, we're just using plain distilled water, and you can see quite clearly it's got quite a little mound of water there. So then we're going to put the thinner right beside it, and immediately you can see that the puddle of thinner is running where the distilled water is just sort of sitting there. Next up is the blue washer fluid. This is the windshield washer fluid that everyone more or less has in their car, and again you can see the puddle is standing tall. It's not wanting to spread out, maybe slightly more than the distilled water, but still. And then compare that to the thinner, and you immediately see the difference. Next up is the IPA. So this is a mixture of 2 parts distilled water to 1 part isopropyl alcohol. And again, with the thinner right next to it, these guys are very similar. You can see they're very close to each other as far as the puddle size goes and the height of it. I think the IPA might be slightly taller, and that's it. Next up, we're going to call this the original recipe. This is 1 quart distilled water with 6 drops each of the rinse aid and glycerin. One of the things I've noticed as I'm going through the test is how difficult it is or easy it is to get each liquid out of the bottle. Those with the most cohesion, you have to squeeze a little harder than those with the least cohesion. It'll almost fall out of the bottle. Like the IPA, these both look very similar. I think again, the one on the left, the homebrew might be slightly taller than the other one. So now we're at the third and final formula. This is my latest creation, if you will. The cohesion of this formula and the Vallejo thinner are very similar. Visually, it's going to be hard to tell the difference. I'm going to get both of them down here, and we'll zoom in a little bit. Visually, these are, I would say, more or less identical to the Vallejo thinner. So now I'll let everything sit for a little while. That way the wetting agents in each formula has a chance to spread out as much as it's going to. And then we'll come back and look. So now we're going to check out the results. It's been about 20 minutes-ish, maybe closer to 30. But we're going to see how well the thinner did against each of the different formulas. So water versus thinner, you can see the quite dramatic difference between the water and the Vallejo thinner. Now the washer fluid versus the thinner. Again, it's a fairly dramatic difference between the surface tension of these 2 liquids. Alright, so now we're going to take a look at the isopropyl alcohol mix versus the thinner. Very similar results. The thinner, I'm going to give it the edge on that one because it's, while the isopropyl alcohol mix laid out flat, the edges are still kind of sharp, where the thinner, the edges don't stand up as much. So if you're in a vented area and you've got respirator, the alcohol is a fine choice, and it'll work for you. Now, my original formula, and this is was a quart of water with 6 drops of rinse aid, the dishwasher rinse aid, and 6 drops of glycerin. Now, I found the glycerin to be on a large batch. I made the quart, but I didn't make it that big anymore after that, because in about 2 weeks of setting out, and something started to grow in the jar, and that's not what you want in your paint thinner. So, but again, their Vallejo thinner is the winner there. Now, on to the last one. This is the new formula. Visually, if you're looking at the edges again, try a different angle. Visually, I can't tell the difference. So the surface tension of my new formula and the surface tension of the thinner are very comparable. Very, very comparable. If you're looking for I'm not going to say non-toxic because it's not, but much less toxic airbrush thinner, the dishwasher rinse aid formula that I'm getting ready to show you is a clear option. All right, so let me set up and show you how I make it. So the formula goes as follows. All right, so this comes in a 6.76 ounce bottle. That's a lot of thinner for me. I'm not going to use that probably anytime soon. I mean, it would take me 6 ounces. That's a couple of years worth of thinner right there for me. So I don't need that much. So I did some math working this after I figured out the best formula to match this. I did the math and it came out to 5 ounces of distilled water. Oh, let me show you how I do that. So I set my scale to fluid ounces. I put on my little mixing container I'm going to use here. Then I tear it out to where the scale is now reading 0. And then start adding water until we get to 5 ounces. Five ounces, or roughly 150 milliliters. For the rinse aid, I use a little syringe with a blunt tip on it to there. So that's 1 milliliter of rinse aid, 5 ounces of water to 1 milliliter of rinse aid. All right, put the cap back on. If you're a klutz like I am, never leave an open bottle. Always put the lid back on it. Now for the glycerin, 2 drops of glycerin. What the glycerin does is it's a retarding agent. It will slow down the drying time slightly. Where alcohol, the isopropyl alcohol mix, that's going to speed up your drying time. So now we've got that, and we're just going to give it a stir. And that's your mix right there. It is best to let it sit overnight before you use it. The glycerin will take a little bit of time to sort of work its way through all the water molecules. So glycerin is an anhydrous solution. It means there's no water in this whatsoever. That's 99.5% glycerin. You want that to mix with the water. So we want to give that some time to sort of settle into it at the molecular level to give it its most working power. Working power? That's silly. Yeah, just let it set overnight. You'll thank me tomorrow. And there you go. Then we'll put that into a container. There's a batch I mixed up previously, so I just keep it in a squirt container, and there you go. So there is your less toxic airbrush thinner for from doing your hobbies, airbrushing, making models, whatever you want to airbrush. It's good all-purpose water-based paint thinner. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you hanging out with me, and go make something.